Hello friends and welcome back to the Blush Studio. Today I'm going to share with you 5 of my favorite watercolor painting tips. I have done another video like this, but I'm going to share with you 5 more. I'll have my first video linked down below. If you go watch that one, be sure to check the comment section. A lot of the tips that I'm sharing with you today are things that you guys shared with me. So if you have a watercolor tip that you absolutely love and would like to see in one of these videos, leave that in a comment for me down below. My first tip for you today is to dedicate time to experiment. Watercolor is not for the faint of heart. It is a very difficult media and is very different from even other forms of painting, just because of the transparency and the way the water lays. So I highly recommend setting time aside if you're ready to get serious about watercolor, just to mess around with different ways of painting, different types of paper, different brushes, different amounts of water. Just have paper set aside that you're just going to, assume that it is just garbage and take the pressure off of yourself. I recommend personally that you start with a couple different pads of different types of watercolor paper, hot press, cold press, different brands, and just experiment with them. Find out which one's your favorite, find out how the watercolor lays on each paper, the dry time, how that changes. You might surprise yourself. This season of experimenting will really help you to build your confidence and also give you just different ways to instinctively respond to different situations. So if you're painting something new, you'll be able to rely a little bit more on your instincts if you've had some more practice just with different types of watercolor, the style that you prefer, or even how much water you use for different situations. My second tip for you today is to work from a limited color palette. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One, it really helps you to grow in your color theory. See, I'm mixing the red and the green up at the top section. I'm mixing different quantities and adding those into the shadows. Now, in this case, I have 2 complements, so that is really easy for me to do. But it helps to create a lot of unity throughout the piece. It makes it really easy to kind of make everything look cohesive when I have the same color peppered in throughout. But if you are working with a limited color palette, you're less likely to be distracted by the color itself, and you're able to focus a little bit more on your painting technique and just different elements. So you can work with a limited color palette such as like a 3 to 5 color palette, or you can even go so far as to go monochromatic. Now, when I was really studying and learning watercolor at the very beginning, I did a ton of monochromatic studies, and it really helped me to focus on the shape and the composition and just how the watercolor was moving more than getting distracted by the colors, because let's face it, the colors are beautiful. That's what we notice first most of the time. But if you're trying to master something, sometimes you have to break it apart and simplify in order to really hone in on the areas that you need to work on. Alright, once you have your paint mixed and you've experimented, it's time to get started. And I recommend working in layers, especially if you're doing something a little more realistic like this, but also if you're working in a looser, more modern watercolor style. Watercolor, because of the water, it doesn't layer over itself well unless it has been dried. So you want to make sure that you're working in layers. So you can see I had the first wash and now I'm doing a second pass. And a pass is just a fancy art term for layers. So once it dries, I do another pass or layer and just kind of deepen up the shadows a little bit, build up that intensity color, and continue to model the piece in order to create that three-dimensional shape. Also, if you're working with layers, you'll need to, for watercolor, work from your lightest value to your darkest value. So you can see I did that with this peony. I started with a very light wash of that blushy pinky color, and now I'm going in with some of the shadows. So I have, I built up some of the intensity, and now I'm going in really hard on those shadows. And you'll see that I'll continue to do that with this piece, just slowly building up that intensity. Watercolor, unlike other forms of paint like acrylic or oils, they do not layer over each other. So you can't like go in and add white watercolor on top of, a color that you've already put down. It just doesn't build that way. It's really just, it's almost like layering windows over each other or layers of glass. It's very opaque and transparent, and you can see the layer on the bottom through the layer on the top. So that's why we work kind of backwards. We work from lightest to darkest. The next tip that I have for you is taking a break. So especially with watercolor, since it dries so differently than it does when the paint is freshly applied, I think it is so important to take a break and just to refocus and so that you can come back fresh and notice things that you wouldn't notice or you weren't noticing beforehand. I prefer to have at least a full night off. So I like to leave a piece that I think is finished and then come into my office the next morning and take another look at it. I started doing this in college and I just found that it isn't until I wake up the next morning that I am able to clearly see, oh, this shadow I'm struggling on. Usually it is building up the intensity of the shadows just for me. But I just find that you really need to have that focus. As kind of a bonus, if you're just struggling with a piece, you can tell it's off, but you're not sure what it is exactly that is wrong. Try looking at it in a mirror. So hold your piece up to a mirror. When you're looking at it, the thing that is wrong and just messed up will jump out at you. It is crazy how that works. Now, if you enjoyed these tips that I just shared with you, I have a couple more bonus tips in the full blog post that goes with this video. I'll have that link down below if you're watching this on YouTube, but those really elaborate a little bit more on each of the points that I touched on. So if you're struggling with a certain aspect or you would like some more clarification, I think that you'll find those bonus tips really helpful. So again, I'll have that link down below. If you enjoyed this video, found it helpful at all, I would so appreciate it if you would leave a comment down below, even if it's something like yay paint, or give me your favorite watercolor tip. Until next time, happy painting.